Hello there, my name's Brandon and I make pictures out of tiny squares. And what we're looking at here is a sprite of what's supposed to be Rick Deckard from Blade Runner that I started making back in January of 2019 and just never finished. I was tidying up some files and discovered this abandoned work, so, rather than understandably keeping it from ever seeing the light of day, I thought I'd just share it as an example of how sometimes things just don't really work out and you kind of forget about them. And so today I'm actually going to go back to the drawing board and give it another go. To get started, I'm creating a stick figure to find the proportion and pose of the sprite. I can tell that this is the same way that I started the 2019 sprite, because there's a single piece of evidence in my layers there showing that as the first step also. But I think the original sprite didn't work out for a couple reasons. Firstly, the pose isn't really too interesting. It's just Deckard with his hands in his pockets, which, sure, you can kind of find that as a common pose when searching reference images of this character, but it really isn't the best thing to showcase the character in a dynamic way. If we're just making a single sprite, I don't think we want to waste that by having Deckard just kind of casually jingling change in his pocket. We might want that slick movie trailer, blaster out action kind of pose. Secondly, the sprite styling, in its unfinished form at least, was leaning very simple and cartoony, and this was the result of me leaving the black line work throughout the sprite. There's nothing wrong with that style in and of itself. In fact, a lot of my work, maybe most of my work to this day, is very much a styling like this. But for this character, I think it'll be more fitting to do something that captures a more serious tone as far as the style goes. One of the ways I'm going to achieve this is by using more realistic proportions for the head to body ratio here. In the original sprite, Deckard's head accounts for about 1/4 to 1/3 of his entire height, which are very deformed proportions. So in the new sprite, I've sized it out to be closer to about 1/5 of the body height, which is still not quite to the level of realistic proportions. It's maybe more that of an anime character or something. But I know that I'll at least need some of that real estate in order to add a couple facial features, so it's kind of a nice compromise. Like I mentioned, I'm also attempting a more dynamic pose this time around. So I've got him with his blaster drawn here, which also kind of just establishes more about this character in case someone isn't familiar with them. The dynamics are also enhanced by the two different angles used in the footing, as well as the way that I've swept his trench coat out. The reason that it's going out to the right is just because there's lots of open space there underneath the outstretched arm. So it gives us something dynamic to kind of fill that empty space with. If it were sweeping off to the other side, it'd just kind of be occupying the space where his hand is anyway, and it'd be splitting the visual weight of the sprite in a different way. Actually, I think probably that'd be cool also, but that's what I did, was kind of what I was thinking at the time, right? I also like the way that the trench coat kind of points out forward, but back at the sprite also, so it kind of keeps your eye maybe caught in a loop looking at the character here. For the coloring, the palette that I'm using here is a really old one of mine. It's just been perfectly preserved in this old Photoshop file that I'm working within. This is one of the first palettes that I ever put together, and I used to use it for a lot of my character sprites back in the day. And so I thought it'd be fun to do the coloring for the new Deckard sprite using this one also, just kind of to pay homage to this original abandoned idea. In order to avoid having black line work around the entire sprite, I've changed the outlines towards the top of the sprite into a colored outline. Just kind of using one tone darker than what the fill color is. And then also I've broken up that line work into smaller segments rather than having continuous lines, which is something that I've been playing with for a while now, and I just really like the way that it reads for this kind of sprite style, as well as being able to finally control the angles within the sprite design. I think it makes sense for the lighting also. It's kind of as if the light source is strong enough that it's going to wash away those outlines in those spots near the top. The last thing I've done is just applying a few highlights here and there, and not being afraid to mix a few different colors next to each other, which often just gives a slight bump to the detail and the lighting of a sprite. In the end, I noticed that the new Deckard sprite was only 2 pixels shy of being the same height as the abandoned one, so I just decided to add that height back in by making his legs longer, and now they're both 45 pixels tall. I really love the style changes compared to what the trajectory of the old one was, and I think the proportions here are definitely looking a lot more fitting for the tone of this character. I think it'd be fun to explore a full Blade Runner mockup in this style, so I may have to try that at some point, or maybe I'll start it and abandon it and then pick it back up again after 2 years. But either way, I hope you found this interesting. So thank you for watching, and take care and keep it square.